We're ready to start now. A very good afternoon, good evening, or a good morning, wherever you're joining from all over the world. And a warm welcome to you. My name is Susanne Luger. I'm at the library of the Johannes Kepler University in Linz in Austria. And there I'm head of the team of license management and scholarly services. Together with Anja, we will be guiding you through this exciting event we have planned for you today. And are very happy that so many of you are here today. The title of the session, as you know, is It Takes a Village, Safeguarding Quality in Scholarly Communication. And this is an event that is held in form of a roundtable, where representatives from different stakeholder groups within scholarly communication are joining. They range from the scientific community to the publishing industry and also librarianship. And they will together talk about their roles and their responsibilities in scholarly communication, especially in regards to furthering and safeguarding quality, seeing as quality is crucial for the integrity of the scholarly record and also trust in science. But the questions we want to ask is, does quality even mean the same for everyone in the room, or are there different kinds or types of quality that we're talking about and caring for? And we will also discuss the opportunities and challenges that the transformation and changes bring along in publishing, like the transition to open access. Today, our goal is to lift the curtain and give you more insight into the processes and the people involved that are otherwise not that visible for everyone. But before introducing our participants of today's roundtable, Anja will give you a quick overview of today's agenda and also some housekeeping rules. Over to you, Anja.
Thank you, Susanne, and welcome to our session today. My name is Anja Saatweber. I've been with Elsevier for almost 10 years and currently working as Customer Success Manager for universities and research institutes in Austria and Switzerland. I will provide a brief overview of our today's agenda, so please feel free to post your question in the Q&A section. Please only use the Q&A tab for your questions. We will address them at the end of the discussion. To get to know you better, I will present three questions as polls, and one after the other, and a fourth question at the end of this session. This roundtable discussion is hosted on Researcher Academy, an entirely free e-learning platform designed to unlock the potential of early and mid-year career researchers. Once the roundtable concludes, you will be able to download a certificate of participation. I will start the first poll. So, and while we are waiting for your responses on our poll, shall we start to introduce our first speaker, Susanne?
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on. Yes, of course, we can start introducing our participants. We will do it just alphabetically by order of first name. Let's start off with Clara Ginter. She is director of the University Library at the University of Veterinary Medicine in Vienna, also in Austria.
Clemens Schwarzinger, Associate University Professor and Deputy Head of the Institute for Chemical Technology of Organic Materials at the Johannes Kepler University, Linz, Austria.
Then we have Marco Giudici, Editor-in-Chief of the journal Experimental and Molecular Pathology at Elsevier.
And we have Sarah Jenkins, Director for Research Integrity and Publishing Ethics at Elsevier.
And last but not least, we welcome Wim Meester. He is Head of Production Management for Scopus.
I'm starting the second poll now. So I hope you can see the poll and just enter keywords. So we can leave this poll a little bit open because participants are asked to enter keywords. Maybe we can start with the first question.
Yes, and to start off this roundtable, we thought that we just introduced our participants by name and by title, but what this title even means and what their roles in scholarly publishing and scholarly communications are, we leave them to them to explain a little bit. And to start off this round, we will ask Marco Giudici what his role is in scholarly communications.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Is everything good?
Yes,
Perfect.
everything is
so, as Suzanne pointed out, I'm an editor-in-chief. I work internally at Elsevier, which means that this is my full-time role. I'm not an part of academia anymore, and this will influence the way I look at my role, especially about safeguarding quality. So, as an editor-in-chief, I really care about the quality and the integrity of the science that is published. I usually would like to refer to 3 pillars that are, the basics of my position to this topic. The first one is about education and networking, basically through communication. It's very important in my role to be able to communicate with clarity with the authors, but not only with them, also with the different units at the journal, especially with the editorial board members. And the aim for this pillar is basically the community reach and the engagement of all the people in the community that is around the journal. The second main pillar that I work on always is collaboration. So I am the editor-in-chief of a journal, but the journal is not just an editor-in-chief. It's many different units, all important the same. I need to be able to communicate to the other scientific editors at the journal, the publisher, or the journal manager or the production team, in order to give the smoothest experience possible to the authors who submit their papers to the journal. And the third and very important point that I always try to work on is to be updated. We need to know always how science is evolving, where research is going, but not only that, we always have to be updated on integrity, following, the guidelines and explaining them as more clear as possible to all the others submitting to the journal. So this is just to summarize how I interpret my role as editor-in-chief internally. Based on the fact that I am internal, it is very important for me to still be in contact with the research community. So how do I do that? Through the editorial board. It is very important for me to set up a very comprehensive editorial board that can, through its expertise, I can be led to my choices.
Thank you very much, Marco. May I can hand over to Clemens about your thoughts and why on
Well, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for attending this wonderful event that we host here. I'm in the role of an active researcher still, despite my age. I'm still working in the lab, I'm writing the papers, but here I represent the role of a reviewer. So what is the reviewer doing? I mean, the reviewer is most likely what you will be in the first stage as an early career researcher. Once you have written your paper, you're in a database, and you may be contacted by journals to act as a reviewer. So while the submission is going through the hands of the editor usually is, I would call it, the manager of the journal, but he cannot be the specialist in all of the topics that the paper he gets will be written in. So this is why he's searching for reviewers. So the role of the reviewer is we have to check the manuscripts that are submitted, and not only check them for obvious things like is everything here, is the work within the scope of a certain journal, for example, but we have to check the quality. And this is most important because all other people rely on the response of the reviewer. And I know that it is very often hard, because if you go up in the ranks, you have multiple publications already, then the number of people who ask you for a review is also increasing very strongly. I know it's time consuming. I know you cannot at all the times accept a review, but what is very, very important is, please, if you get such an invitation, respond to the invitation. Either by responding, you do not have time, because then people just know what it is, or in the best of all cases, respond, yes, this is my part of the research as well, not only doing the research, but also making sure that the quality of research that is getting published is extremely high. And how do we do this as a reviewer? Usually you should be an expert in the field. If you're not an expert in the field, then you can just decline. But very often it's just enough, I would say, that you are experienced researcher in any similar field, because you can check for the technical quality. Has everything been presented so that other researchers can repeat the experiments that you described, for example? Is all the information given? I come from the field of chemistry, so instrument related. Is all the instrumentation described very well? Is it possible that you follow the instructions there? And this is the thing that you should look for. And of course, also it is important to have a look at the results in the discussion section. Not only that the results are obtained in a good quality, but are the conclusions that have been drawn out of these observations, are they correct? Are they valid? And this is for me the most important step and the first step in maintaining the quality. If something is not proper, it should not be published. Because what I very often see with my students is, I found some paper and they say this and that. And I look at them, this is simply not possible by physical reasons, but it's published. So this is the thing that I understand under maintaining quality. Make sure that those papers get not published. Unfortunately, the number of publications is increasing every year. So if you want to publish a paper, let's be honest, you can push it through. But the more we stick together, especially in the role of the reviewers, the more easy is it for everybody in the community to be sure that the information that is already published is of high quality and what is written there is already valid and true. Yeah, that's my first 5 cents to the first round. Maybe we can go on. Next step.
Thank you very much. Clara, what is your role in scholarly communication? Why are you here?
I'm here representing the world of academic libraries. What is commonly associated when you think of libraries and scholarly communication, that we are concerned with scholarly communication post-publication through the provision of literature, but that has changed significantly over the past years, especially through open access and open science. Libraries, academic libraries, are now far more engaged also in the pre-publication process. In German language speaking countries, we have seen the establishment of publishing, so-called publishing services over the recent years. So we now offer support services, guidance on the publishing process. In my day-to-day work, what does that mean? I'm teaching at my university, both first years and PhD students, about the publishing process and quality assurance, what quality standards are. And together with Susanne Luger, we are co-leading a project on predatory publishing in Austria. We are now in our 4th and final year of the project. We have established a community of practice, so we will continue with the topic. And what we can see also through this community, we are 20 people, that quality in scholarly communication, specifically formal quality, is of concern to academic libraries in many ways. especially in regard to education, to providing guidance and orientation on scholarly communication, on quality standards, and also on fraudulent practices such as predatory publishing.
Thank you very much. Over to Sarah. Sarah, why are you here? What is your role in scholarly communication?
Thank you so much, Anya, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this really important event. And as we've been hearing from all of my colleagues on this panel, scholarly publishing is a real shared endeavour. It does indeed take a village. And I think that's even more so when it comes to the area that I'm specifically responsible for, upholding research integrity and publishing ethics during the course of the scholarly process. So in common with many other publishing houses, Elsevier has a global team of integrity and ethics specialists working really closely with our editors, such as Marco, and with all of our publishing colleagues who help to look after and to manage our journals. And we've got 4 main areas of responsibility that we work on to uphold quality. So first of all, we screen manuscript submissions for integrity and ethics concerns. So those concerns might include things such as unauthorized, late-stage authorship changes, citation manipulation, or statements around things like patient consent that haven't been included, for example, in a case report in a health sciences journal. Now, we work with our editors to remedy these concerns, or if we can't remedy them, then unfortunately, we need to reject the manuscript for publication in our journal. The second area of responsibility that my team has is to investigate integrity and ethics concerns that arise after publication. So we have a series of tools, including some of those that help us to identify image manipulation and duplication, for example, as well as having tried and tested techniques that allow us to substantiate whether or not there are major errors in a paper that impact on the results, or indeed whether there has been a breach of publishing ethics policies or standards, whether that's in the paper itself or whether that's in the editorial evaluation and the peer review process. And where we do find those, we work with our editors to correct the scientific record. Our third area of responsibility is around developing educational and training materials for use by the communities that we serve. And not only do they seek to put forward best practices, but also to have practical actions that each person, so whether you're an editor, an author, or a reviewer, can take to uphold integrity and ethics. And our fourth and final area of responsibility is to collaborate, working with colleagues in other publishing houses and also with industry and community bodies. So all of our journals are members of COPE, so that's the Committee on Publication Ethics. And we also work super closely with United to Act. That's the joint initiative of COPE and STM that's looking at the challenge of paper mills in particular, but also with the STM Integrity Hub, where we share expertise and data, but also where we share technology. So, for example, we've recently done a lot of work around a duplicate manuscript submission detection system that will look for detected duplicate manuscripts that have been submitted across different journals that are members of different publishing houses. So with that, I hope that's given you a bit of an overview of what my team and I do, and I shall hand back.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Very good insights from your work. And I hand over to Wim. Wim, why are you here? What is your role?
Thank you, Anja. And I think I'm the last one in row to introduce myself, and I think for a good reason, because we heard about quality from an article level perspective, from a journal level perspective, and I'm here, I'm invited to join this roundtable, because I'm coming in from a different perspective of one aggregation level higher, which is the databases of journals. My responsibility at Elsevier is the content and policy for analytic products. And one of the major products we have there is Scopus, which covers almost 30,000 journals. And how we safeguard the quality of that, that is my main responsibility in my role. So that's why I'm here, and we're trying to have a mission with Scopus to create a data set which can be trusted, so that it can be used for making decisions about research with confidence. And we can only do that if we have a quality data set. When we talk about quality for journals in Scopus and if they meet a certain selection criteria, and I said that is my responsibility, it's actually not myself who's making those decisions. And it's also not Elsevier employees who make that decision. It's an independent board, the Content Selection Advisory Board, who are individuals from all over the world representing different subject areas, and they make decisions about which journals are selected for Scopus coverage and not, and which not. And they use selection criteria, which is a mix of qualitative criteria and quantitative criteria. I think the most important aspects there around quality is actually peer review. So the actual academic quality of the papers published in that journal, that's a main aspect of why a journal can be selected for Scopus. But peer review itself or only is not the only indicator that we have for quality. So besides that is also the quality standards or publication standards of the journals that they adhere to. As said, it is a different aggregation level that we are working with. So we're not looking at the individual article itself. We're really looking at the journal level quality standards. So what are the policies of those journals that they're dealing with when, for example, there is plagiarism happening in the journal and things like plagiarism or any ethics issues. Sarah already talked about it. It's happening with all publishers all around the world, everywhere. But I think what is important around quality is how you deal with that when cases like that are being detected. So what is your policy as a journal to address those issues if they occur with some papers that you have published in that journal, for example? So that is the area around quality that we're looking at for new journals coming in who apply for Scopus coverage and want to be covered in database. And we have around 3,000 to 4,000 submissions per year. And these are all being reviewed based on those quality standards to make sure if they're included in Scopus or not. However, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop when a journal is in Scopus. And actually, a lot of the work, particularly around quality, is about that the quality standards are also maintained. And issues around predatory publishing or journal hijacking or other research integrity issues, those are really things that we are monitoring to make sure that those journals that are covered in Scopus also remain at those quality levels. So we are developing tools to track outlier behavior or unexpected performances of journals, and that makes us gives us a trigger on doing more investigation about those journals. When they're flagged for reevaluation, they're sent back to the Content Selection Advisory Board. They use the same criteria as for the selection procedure, and then make a decision if the journals continue to be covered in the Scopus database or are discontinued. And particularly on that second part, on that reevaluation, a lot of research integrity issues are being looked into, and there we're also working with the research community, and I think that's also very important why we're here today, with different people from different aspects of the research community working together on issues like this. Because as a journal editor alone, or as a publisher alone, or as a producer of a database indexer alone, we cannot solve the issue and we have not a complete view. So therefore, I think it's important to make this a collaborative effort and working together on safeguarding the quality of research in general. Well, I think I'll stop here and hand it back to Anja.
Thank you all for your first inputs on what your roles are in scholarly communications, what kinds of quality you're concerned with. And as it's really resonating for one of the last Q&As that came in, I want to circle back maybe to the peer reviewers or claimants. It is often said that you as the research community, as peer reviewers, as editors, are doing this work for free, and it's not really credited as much as being an author, so to speak. So why do you do it? What do you gain out of it? What motivation do you have to do this job?
That's a really good question. Why do we do this? Well, first of all, we love science, don't we? So we are scientists, we're researchers, and we all know if we submit a paper, we're anxiously waiting for the editor to contact us with the letter minor revision, major revision. We have found some reviewers that took care of your paper. So this is the most important reason for me to do this, because other people are doing it as well. And it is part of the research community. It has to be part of the research community that we have people who do this, and in my opinion, who have to do it for free. I mean, of course, it's nice to have some benefit. I know a couple of journals offer you some vouchers for getting open access publications a little bit cheaper. If you get $50 off of 2,500, I don't know if that's that much of a motivation. Or other people call for, let's have professional reviewers. I have been editor-in-chief for a couple of years now also, and I was also on the other side trying to find these reviewers. And I can tell you, it is really not easy. I mean, I had papers where I had to invite more than 20 potential reviewers just to get 2 or 3 responses. And out of these 2 or 3 responses, as usual, just one saying, yes, I will do it. And I will do it in time as well. That's the next problem. So why do we do it? Actually, that's a really a good question. I have not any better answer to provide than it is part of the game. And if you want to publish yourself, then please also make sure that you do the review work. It's the best that we can do to ensure that the quality of the journals that we are reading is still up. You might have a couple of people who do it for money. If you do it for money, then you do it for money, but usually not for quality. So the more papers you can review in a shorter time, the more money you earn. But of course, the quality is going down. It's better to review not that much journals or not that much manuscripts, but do it properly. And in my opinion, do it for free, because usually you get paid by the university, you have a fund, and this fund includes also this scholarly work. That's my plea to everybody. Please keep doing that stuff.
Thank you very much.
I think,
Anna, do you want to say something?
yeah, I mean, chipping in there, we talk when we speak about scholarly communication in English, we talk about the scholarly commons. This is a common good. Everyone who uses this common good should also do his or her part in caring for the common good. Else we are in trouble, and in serious trouble. So I think it is also that there is an attitude of care also behind it, about caring for this common good of the scientific knowledge we have and we guard and safeguard.
I think we can open the floor so everyone who want to chip in and say something to contribute on this part. Or maybe Marco, from your perspective.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I do believe that being a reviewer is part of what defines us as scientists. And I totally agree with what has been said so far. And I just want to stress out again that we are all part of a community. So a community made of very, different and diverse expertise, but all those parts have to work together. So I remember my time when I was PhD or postdoc, I was actually pretty happy to review. I was feeling part of something that was just bigger than the lab I was working into. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'll chip in here as well. As you said, Marco, it's something that should make you proud. What I see, especially with my younger colleagues, in the beginning, they start to be a little bit nervous. I'm now reviewer. What should I look after? What is most important? So in my point, it would be much better to have a clear picture of what everybody's doing in the role as a publisher, as a reviewer, as an editor, and transport this also, and this is, I think, what we're trying to do today, transport this to the early career researchers so that they are not afraid to do their work, to get the jobs. And when you're invited to be a reviewer, just chime in and say, yes, I'm proud now. People ask for my expertise. I've made 1 or 2, 3 papers that fit this topic. So why shouldn't I be the one to check if the paper that was submitted would be at least the quality that I would like to have when I submit it? So this is, again, I think it is important. And as we already said, if we don't do the reviewing anymore, we are really stuck. Like, what would happen? We would need to have professional reviewers. Professional reviewers need to get paid. So who is paying them? Journals are paying them. Publishers are paying them. So you already have some difference in publishing. We have publishers who come from communities, like the community of physical astronomy, and they decided we want to have a journal, and we set up all the functions, and we do it because we want to develop the field. On the other side, you might have publishers who do it for the money, which is not bad by itself. But at a certain point, if it's just about the money, then you cannot complain if the quality is not there, because the more papers you publish, the more money you earn. So the quality of the review is obviously going down. And to prevent this, we need reviewers. And we need all of you here in the scientific community to do these reviews. Maybe not for free, but at least for just a little respect, some certificate, where I have no idea. I leave this up to the publishers to give us some idea what benefits we could have as reviewers. Any ideas?
Sure. And I wonder if I can chip in here. So obviously you've heard a little bit about my role so far in the scholarly publishing enterprise, looking after research integrity and publishing ethics. And one of the things that I wanted just to add to this particular conversation is to say that I see very much the role of my team and I to make it easier for all of you out there who might be budding reviewers. So I talked a little bit about some of the checks that we carry out for integrity and ethics concerns. And those are done not just immediately after submission, but over the course of a manuscript's journey from submission all the way through to that final editorial decision that somebody like Marco will make upon somebody like Clemens's advice. And one of the things that we strive to do is to make sure that we are asking you as a reviewer to look at the quality of the science, to look at the quality of the experiments that have been done, at the methodology, whether or not the results stack up. We don't want you to have to do all of the extra checks. That's something that we see very much as our responsibility to do, so that you can, I'm not sure whether this is the right word, but so that you can enjoy that experience of being a reviewer, so that you can learn what's going on within the discipline that you're serving. So that's something that we certainly do as a publisher. And of course, I would be completely remiss not to point out that part of the service that Researcher Academy offers are a number of very well thought of workshops on peer review, on how to get started. And I saw a couple of comments, both in the Q&A, but also in the chat, from people who were noting that they were early career researchers, they were just getting started and wondering if we had any tips that we could pass on. And one of those that I would pass on in today's webinar is to say, please do use this opportunity to explore some of those other resources that Researcher Academy has. They're completely free of charge, and they can take you through how to review a paper, as well as how to get started as an author as well. So I think there's an awful lot that publishers do behind the scenes to make your work as a reviewer less onerous, more enjoyable, and to really focus you on the quality of the science rather than anything else.
Thank you.
Well, you're mute.
Okay, sorry. To chip in here, I think most researchers, when they hear the word quality, they think about quality of the content, so in terms of the science to be published. But there is another aspect to quality with which Sarah, Wim, and I are mostly concerned, and these are formal aspects. And this is something I think many researchers aren't much aware of. What are formal aspects we are actually looking at? And this begins, for example, when we check a journal for its quality, begins with simple things like how to contact the journal. Do they just provide a WhatsApp address, which is a no-go, and nothing else? Do they just provide a generic Gmail or AOL or whatever address? Again, a no-go. What do they pretend in terms of in regard to predatory journals? What do they pretend in terms of impact metrics? Much of it is invented. Where do they claim to be indexed? Are these even indices that have any relevance, or can anyone be registered there? So when we started working in our project on formal quality aspects, we came up with 72 different aspects. So this is not a simple topic, but rather quite a complicated matter, because so much is changing. And also, especially predatory publishers are adapting so quickly. So this is no trivial feat also to make sure that the formal criteria and the formal quality criteria are matched. And why is that important? Because these formal quality criteria, they are a cornerstone of trust in the journal.
Maybe I can comment on that. I think also what we heard earlier about that peer review, I think is a very important way of looking indeed at the scientific quality, but also I think it is under pressure in the sense that we're talking here with early career researchers. There's more of them, and it is only growing of more people who are going to publish, but the amount of reviewers is not growing at the same pace. And we see that, at least from when we review journals, that there is a pressure on that peer review system, in the sense that are there enough people who can do the review of those of the high quantity of articles that come in, and then also when that peer review is being done, I think there were already some good comments about like what you should be able to look at, and really at the scientific quality of that paper, which is very important. But also I think the questions that are currently being asked in peer review are changing a little bit in terms of how the whole research community is changing. It's not so much only anymore about, is this a good fit for this journal and is the scientific quality okay, but it's also about evaluating risk, and particularly risk around research integrity. So how can you make sure that actually this kind of work is authentic? And I think already some identifiers that Clara mentioned around the journal itself, there are signs about authenticity of that journal. Is it really to be trusted? But I think there's also more signs of that, not only on the journal level, but also on the article level, and on the whole research system in total, that we need to look at currently, and that are also very important for the quality aspects. Predatory journals have been mentioned before, but there's also the hijack journals that are trying to fool authors to make sure that they submit their work to that particular website, but in reality, that is not the website of the genuine journal, but it's a fake copy of that journal website, and they're only there to take advantage of the trying to mislead the authors to publish there. But it's happening in many different places. And also we ourselves as indexers are getting fooled by this, or there is these paper mills in which there's a lot of articles being produced, but you actually don't know what is the authenticity of that. Is it really, has it gone through peer review, and is it really created by a human, or maybe even if it's created by new AI generative systems that are out there. So in that sense, indeed, I think quality is a lot indeed of the scientific quality, but also need as Clara mentioned, the formal aspects of quality needs to be looked at as well.
And just adding to that, we have to remember with quality assurance that we have quality assurance measures, be it peer review, be it formal checks, that were originally established for printed papers. And we are now in the digital era with new ways of publishing with less limitations of how much can get published, with new ways of fraud, etc. And we are now in a transition period where we will see which measures will hold, which measures we have to adapt. We don't know that. We can't make a forecast if peer review, as we see it now, will be the same in 6-7 years.
Yeah, thank you very much. That also I have a question from the audience, and I think this also leads to the question: what aspects of quality is your part in saving or safeguarding the quality? And the question is, if a published paper has been plagiarized, who is responsible for addressing the problem?
And Anya, I wonder if I can start by with that particular answer. Plagiarism is something that my team sees at least once a week, sadly. So whoever's responsible, essentially it is the journal that has published the plagiarized paper. So what would normally happen is that we would perhaps find the plagiarism ourselves using tools such as Authenticate. Perhaps we would be tipped off by a reviewer such as Clemens, or perhaps we would be tipped off by a reader or find it through some of the post-publication audits that we do. But when we find plagiarism, we find out first of all whether we are the plagiarizing journal or the plagiarized journal. And then what we need to do is to follow due process. So that always involves an editor looking at both papers, determining the extent of the plagiarism and also what kind of plagiarism, so whether that's self-plagiarism or plagiarism of another's work. We then always have due process. So it's really important that we reach out to the author who has plagiarized to ask them for an explanation and to take that into account before we decide what corrective action we may need. So that may include a retraction of an article, and always in the retraction notice, we would note which paper had been plagiarized. That's a way of kind of restoring natural justice, if you like, of pointing out to the community which author group has been infringed. But just to kind of circle back to the premise of the question, the responsibility lies with the journal that has published the paper that has plagiarized another's work. So I hope that helps. And yes, teams such as mine are always happy to step in and to help resolve these challenges.
Thank you very much for your answer. Is anyone else want to add to this? Or
yeah, maybe I can
just
also...
quickly. Oh, please.
Okay. I think it's responsibility of the journal, but it's also responsibility of everybody of us. If it's the reviewer, he's the first one to see it. And if you see that paper is already published somewhere else, the best idea would be that it doesn't get published at all. But also the readers, anybody who sees the plagiarism, just point it out and send it to whoever you can contact at the journal. It's most likely the editor-in-chief or to a publishing director. I don't know how easy it is to reach this far up in the hierarchy. I think that the editor-in-chief is the one whose address is most likely published in the journal homepage. So whoever finds out about the plagiarism, just reach out to those guys and they will climb up the ladder and make sure that this one is removed.
thank you, Clemens. Marco, you intend to say something as well?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for these, exhaustive replies. I don't have to add on that. Just a little thing that, as it happens for the post-publication, it is very important also at the submission stage. And these tools, we use them for every submission that comes to our journals. And for example, Authenticate, as Sarah cited. And our approach is always the same, to ask first if it was, an unintended error, or to understand if it was potential misconduct. And then we will follow the same guideline even for the pre-publication process. Of course, prevent will be much better, but we have cases where we have to correct.
Thank you very much, Marco.
Yes, I think we already touched a little bit on the subject of what is changing in scholarly communication, especially with all the technological changes, but we also have open access, which has been a huge factor these past 20 years. And what we would like to know is what kind of challenges or also opportunities do you see with that, also in regards to quality? What does this mean for that? And who do we want to start? Clara, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think we will see massive changes. I mean, no question about it. I mean, we have a continuous increase in publications per year, and publication outlets do not increase at the same measure. We have other problems in the system. I mean, these are not just problems or challenges to scholarly communication, but the entire scientific enterprise is that the system is under stress and has to change, adapt, and evolve. And I think we are now really at the stage, especially with the arrival of artificial intelligence, where we can't make any predictions anymore what will happen within the next 12 months and how things will evolve and adapt. The same with open access and open science. And we see now, I mean, I'm a 100% supporter of open access and open science, but we see now also unintended consequences, be it that the current prevalent business model of article processing charges is abused and used by predatory publishers, be it that we suddenly see that with the open access repositories, the free access to scholarly content, it's now much easier for paper mills to harvest content they can mash up to questionable articles of no quality whatsoever, or that it is much easier to plagiarize. So we are really called for to be very active in thinking strategically about how quality assurance should and shall evolve. And for that, and that's also why we chose the title for today, it takes a village. What we can't afford anymore as before, that we have the different stakeholders and everyone does their own bit in their own house. We need the exchange between the different stakeholders so that we can really start joint efforts and also have very honest discussion about our interests, where they diverge, where they converge, and how we can move forward.
We can continue on that, and I think it was already said. I think what the big change here is that the entry, the barrier to entry, is much lower than it used to be. It's much easier to create content, whether that be authentic or not. There are all these tools around that can easily create content, but also to create a new journal is very easy. You don't need a lot of investment to set a journal up. You just create a website, mimic as if it were a genuine one, and you are there and you are a player in the field. So the barrier to entry is much lower than it used to be. And with that, I think it's also that the quality measures that are out there, we still have to look at the same quality measures. But I think it is very important that we also have some kind of way of identifying where things are going wrong. So that evaluation of risk, I think that is the important thing to look at. And indeed, it's not something that we can do alone. We need to collaborate on that. I think everybody has their role in there. Like Scopus as an indexing service is working on their own tools based on data science to spot actually the changes in journal behavior or outliers in journal behavior that can indicate like this is something suspicious that is worth to look into, and maybe there is something wrong. Maybe it is genuine, but at least it is worthwhile for an individual to look at that to see if that is of the same quality or not. But Also, we can not do that in isolation, and we are already working together with, for example, the team of Sarah to not only look on that from a Scopus perspective, but also look at that from the more publisher perspective. And with that, I think it is important to not only work with indexes, publishers, but also with the whole research community. But also something I want to say is that, yes, there are concerns and there are things that we have to be careful about, and it is much more complex than it was years ago. We should also not be or I also don't want to be too concerned for all the early career researchers that are here today that are scared, what can I do? Because I think it is also important that we continue to make sure that also early career researchers are confident about the research that they publish and that they have the ways of doing that. So all the things that we are saying today about trying to find quality, I think it is also a lot about common sense. So I think that's also something that I would like to give away to authors who want to publish their work. If it is your research, it is very valuable to you, and there's only one chance of getting it published. So if you do that, do your due diligence. Look at those journals that you want to publish in. Look at those indicators that Claire, for example, mentioned of how you can recognize a journal if it is genuine, and only submit to a journal if you're fully convinced that it is a genuine journal and that you want to give your research to, in the sense of having it distributed to the rest of the world. So there are things that we can help you with and give you indicators, but in the end, it is your research and it's your responsibility where to publish it. But please be careful with that and do your due diligence.
You know, I think Wim makes some really, really excellent points there. And I just want to kind of like jump in and reiterate that point to all of the early career researchers who are joining us today. It is incredibly important that you take your time as you start to prepare your manuscript. And one of the things that can really help you to do that is to think very carefully about the supporting materials and documentation that you may wish to include with your manuscript. So, for example, and just thinking about kind of some of the open science concepts here, following on from open access and the conversation that we've started on that, if you have a data set, make sure that that goes into a repository, whether that's a generalist repository or whether that's one which is specific to your discipline or to your domain. Make sure that that data is linked to your manuscript so that when Marco is evaluating it in his role as an editor, or when Clemens is peer reviewing it in his role as a referee, they can really see what is the data that underlines your manuscript and which underpins the results that you are reporting. And I think a large portion of this, if you like, is that common sense that Wim has been talking about in his response. So there are things that you can do as an author to make sure that you are as credible and as transparent as you can be to help your editors and your referees be able to make an informed decision as to whether or not your manuscript is, first of all, right for the journal that you have submitted to. It helps the referees to really judge whether or not the results that you are reporting are indeed underpinned by the methodology, by the data that you have collected. And it allows teams such as myself to make sure that you've done everything to comply with our ethics policies and with our guide for authors. And actually, that's another plea that I'm just going to put forward now. All of our journals have detailed guides for authors. Make sure that you read them. I appreciate that many of them seem very detailed and maybe they seem a little bit daunting when you first take a look at them, but I guarantee you that they are full of very pertinent information, including things such as reporting standards, reporting guidelines, ethics statements that you need to include. So don't risk a desk rejection from Marco. Make sure that you have complied with those guide for authors before you submit. And I think that will stand you in good stead, whether we're judging your manuscript for, kind of suitability of the journal, novelty of the results, or indeed whether we're looking at it from an integrity and an ethics perspective. Take your time, make sure it's really ready to submit before you do so.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think this is also partly answering maybe one of our question which came in, and I just read the question. How do we help postgraduate, undergraduate students understand this need for an attitude of common good when it comes to research? Sometimes publication is considered the requirement for clearing a course or getting a promotion. I think the help how we can help here is something what you, Sarah, just explained. Reading the guide for authors and
Indeed. No, I think, Anya, that's absolutely right. I think it's the guide for authors, but also just coming back to some points that Wim made and that Clara made. Think very carefully, together with your supervisor, for example, exactly what you want to submit and where you would like to submit it. So choose the journal, look at the aims and scope of the journal, make sure that you also look at papers that the journal has recently published. That's really a good way of making sure that you're submitting to a relevant publication. Make sure that you understand what the peer review process of that journal is and how long it's going to take. So I've seen some real panicked emails from authors to editors saying, you know, I need to get this paper published, otherwise I can't graduate, but they've only submitted it 2 weeks ago. So make sure that you've got those timelines in mind as well. I think some of that goes back to planning right at the start, working with your supervisor, understanding what might be appropriate to publish, what is perhaps inappropriate to publish, and making sure that if you are going to go on and you're going to continue your work in that area, make sure that you don't fall into that trap of salami slicing. So if you're going to be doing a lot of work down the line, make sure that you don't publish prematurely, which stops you from publishing those results again. But I don't know if those points resonate perhaps with Marco or with Clemens, who of course, you know, see these kinds of papers coming through. I don't know if you've got other things to add there for our ECRs.
I'm happy to jump in here. Thank you for this. I think all the points you talk about, Sarah, are perfect. Like actually, I would really take them as suggestion if I will be an early career researcher and trying to publish in a journal. I'm happy to explain further what is the initial phase of a manuscript sent to a journal, because it can help replying to this question and give more clarity to this point as well. So I can say from my perspective, first of all, touching base on ethics again, there is no a good scientific journal without a firm and established ethics policy. So in the roles of basically every role at the journal, but especially as editor-in-chief, we are filters in the beginning for every submissions that come to the journal. And the first screening that the submission goes through is for ethical checks. So as you mentioned before, there are many tools that we can integrate in our work in order to make this faster and more precise. But basically, some papers will get stopped at this step because there are unintended error, for example. So we will ask first, but this will be longer editorial time in proceeding with those papers. And I totally agree, and I underline again, it is a shared responsibility from the journal. The journal has to be very clear in what is the aims and scope, what is the guide for authors, what are the requirements, and the authors need to be reading all of this. I can confirm that many papers will get desk rejected or transferred just because they're not in scope with the journal, or there are not some requirement that have been assessed by the authors. And these usually are not big issues. They're just little requirements that we will be sure that if photo will be read, will be taken care of. And then, of course, if a journal passes the first, if a paper passes the first triage, then there is the assessment of the scientific quality. And as Clemens was saying before, peer review here is the key. And as an editor, it's very important also from our perspective to assess the reviews, because also in that case, we can see peer reviews done a little bit, let's say, too fast and not much in depth. So it's important for us to understand when a review actually have the potential to improve the quality of the manuscript. And this applies also to the next stages of revision. And in this case, I underline again, communication is the key. Communicating with the authors, especially the early career researchers. My suggestion is also choose a journal when you can understand that can be a good communication with the editors, because sending a paper to a journal means also to making it better and understanding in the process. This is not going to be the first paper you're going to send. So this is something that you will learn on and get better with in time.
Thank you very much.
I think what this question also touches on, which we will probably not have the time to discuss today, is the topic of this whole publish or perish system, research assessment, that you need your publications to get your promotion, to get further in your career. And of course, this is a huge topic. And this, of course, also fuels all the misconducts we see and difficulties to find reviewers for all the papers that are submitted. But I guess there are changes afoot. Maybe, Clemens, do you have some insight into that? Just a few sentences, if you have.
Not really any at the moment, sorry.
But this, again, is a subject where we need the collaboration between the scientific communities, the university leaderships, the policies and politics, of course, who also are part of this huge system. So, yes, this is not something we can solve today or tomorrow, but this will be a longer process. But if everyone does his or her part, I guess.
Is I think in many of the responses we just heard is about also the peer review it's taking time, because some things need to be checked, and it needs to be looked at thoroughly by reviewers, but also by internal system to see if it is plagiarized or not, or whatever checks there are going on, and that takes time. And to do that well, it cannot be that something is done within a couple of hours. So also, I do understand that particularly there is pressure on there that you want to have your research published soon, and there is something that you need it for, so you want to have it as quickly as possible. But in the long run, that is not what you want, because a peer review or a journal that promised peer review of 2 days or even 1 week, it sounds too good to be true, and then probably it is too good to be true. And your precious work, I would really say that it is not worthwhile to take the risk to send it to such a journal in which you have a answer really quickly, but in the end, you don't have the credits of it that you could have of that good work.
Also chipping in there, I mean, what you said, Wim, when we look at policies and systems in place, for example, research evaluation, it does not take into consideration that quality at whatever stage, be it writing the paper, be it checking the paper through peer review, etc., takes time. Quality isn't something, I mean, there are voices out there who say, oh, great, that we have now artificial intelligence, we can automate so many processes in quality assurance. Not in science. It will always need a human person to have a look at the paper, to have a look at the journal. Yes, artificial intelligence can aid us. It cannot replace the time it takes to do proper quality assurance. And I think we see changes in Europe. We have this huge initiative with COARA, which aims at changing research evaluation. So there is a growing awareness that we need systemic changes. I mean, we all do our part in safeguarding quality. We all chip away at the problems we are facing, at the challenges we are facing. but there are inherent systemic issues and problems that we all together can't solve. We need the policymakers, we need the universities also on board. And unless we have these systemic changes, we will always have minor or major challenges. And it might still be possible to avoid it, but what is also not taken into consideration with the transition to open science, that we are essentially changing the science system from a closed system to an open system. And this changes everything. And we might put on the blinders and say we continue as we always have, but we will hit the brick wall sooner or later.
Thank you very much, Clara. So regarding open science and challenges and what we just spoke about, do you think the new, let's say, a challenging star on the horizon is generative AI? Is that something where you see is going to challenge us more in the future? What do you think about it? Maybe Sarah, you are.
Yes, I'm sorry. I can't let this one I can't let this one slip by. You know, I think the first thing to say about generative AI is it is a challenge, but I think it is also an opportunity. And I think that we mustn't kind of lose sight of that opportunity and some of the really good things that generative AI may well be able to bring. So if you think about authors whose first language is not English, for example, generative AI really does allow them to rewrite manuscripts so that when they come through to Marco or to Clemens, they're much more easily able to go through to the peer review process. So there's all sorts of opportunities. And that's, you know, before we even get into how you might use generative AI within kind of the you know, within the sort of the science aspect rather than just the preparation of the manuscript. So one thing I will say, though, is that from a publishing perspective, all publishing houses got together fairly early on in 2023. So you will probably all remember that ChatGPT really exploded onto the world stage in November 2022. You know, generative AI was something that we had spoken a little bit about before that, but, you know, most generative AI tools were relatively clunky. They didn't give you the kind of output that you were hoping for. But ChatGPT was the real game changer. And I remember getting together with my counterparts from different publishing houses in January 2023. We just started the new year. I think we were, you know, hoping to start it in a really smooth way. And instead, all of the questions were around generative AI. How is that going to change scholarly publishing? How should we allow authors to use generative AI? And should we allow editors and reviewers to use generative AI, for example? And one of the things that I think was a real success story is that most publishing houses really have very consistent policies around generative AI. And those policies came out pretty early in 2023. So in Elsevier's case, but this is also the case across the major houses, we allow authors to use generative AI in the preparation of their manuscript, provided they do it with human oversight and input, and also, and this is really important, provided that the author declares their use of generative AI, tells us what tool they have used and what version. But by doing that, we have actually opened up to a lot of authors whose first language is not English, for example, and have really allowed them to be able to improve their manuscripts prior to submission. Together with all other publishing houses, though, we decided very quickly that it would be inappropriate for editors and reviewers to use generative AI tools during the course of the editorial evaluation and the peer review process. This breaches the confidentiality of the authors, So you can imagine uploading a manuscript into a tool such as ChatGPT, asking it to produce a review. First of all, doesn't give anywhere near a good enough service to that author, who expects that a subject matter expert will look at that manuscript, will consider it, and will produce a review that helps them to improve their manuscript and helps them to critique what may, what may be improved, for example. But there's also that possibility of putting in patient data, for example, that might be confidential and which is now in a publicly available tool. It might put in data which is, both confidential to the author at that stage, but also in fact might be wrong, and putting that into a tool which is then trained upon it to use it and to produce results. So that's the reason that Elsevier and all of the other publishing houses decided that it was not for editors and for reviewers to use. I think from a research integrity and publishing ethics perspective, we are seeing manuscripts that have clearly used generative AI in the preparation of the manuscript, and the authors have not declared that. That obviously raises questions in the minds of certainly my team, but also the editors of those journals who are looking at the papers, wondering where else they've used generative AI, really thinking about the whole integrity of the paper. And that's when we start to investigate actually a lot further, when we start to look for data sets, for example, and some of those things that we were talking about a bit earlier, where we were giving some tips on early career researchers who were starting to prepare manuscripts. So again, just to kind of come back as I sort of come to a conclusion, to come back to something that Wim was talking about much earlier, it is around common sense. If you plan to use generative AI anywhere in the preparation of your manuscript, please consult the guide for authors for that particular journal. Make sure that it permits you to do so. And if it does permit you to do so, please make sure that you have also read around the conditions that allow you to do that. So whether that's a declaration in the manuscript itself, whether that's completing a form so that the publisher and the editor can take a look at it, it is really, really important that you do so. So I think many opportunities. There are also many challenges. And I think this will continue to develop as well as we go through. I wouldn't be surprised to see these particular policies continuing to evolve over the course of the next 12 months to 5 years as generative AI becomes more normalized, if you like, and as people settle down as to how it's best used and areas where it doesn't really work.
I have a follow-up question to you, Sarah. So, okay, we have the publishers who have policies established, thank God. But what I see in the scientific communities, that it is not at all clear how much of generative AI is permissible or not. I mean, I know researchers in the STEM who simply say, brilliant, now AI is here. I don't have to write an introduction anymore. I don't have to write the methodology section and also the conclusion. I can do what I really want to do, and this is experiments, and that's it, And then we have the other side who go like, oh my God, keep AI out of it, none of it at all. Are you in an ongoing dialogue with the scientific communities? Because, I mean, this should work in tandem, and otherwise it gets difficult. And I know this is difficult because there are so many scientific communities, but how do you keep track of that? How do you establish a continuous dialogue?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Clara, and also such a good point. So one of the things that we are doing is that we are a member of Kangaroo. So this is an initiative that was started by a scientist at UCSD, University of California, San Francisco. And he is actually getting together with many different scientists to work out exactly this question. So there are a number of researchers and scientists from across different disciplines, including medical science, sciences, social sciences, as well as a number of publishing house members. So I'm Elsevier's representative, but we also have representatives from Cell Press and The Lancet. And in other publishing houses, I know that Springer Nature is represented, Wiley is represented, all of the university presses are represented, for example. And one of the things that Giovanni started by doing was to
No?
Sorry, I think I froze for a moment there, but I think I'm back. Or how much you lost there, but I was saying that one of the first things that Giovanni, who is the coordinator of Kangaroo, did was to send out a survey to all of the participants so that we could put in, first of all, the challenges that we were seeing, the opportunities that we were seeing, and then also the policies that we had adopted. That work is not yet complete, but I believe that Kangaroo will report later this year. And Clara, to kind of bring that back to the question that you asked me, the idea behind Kangaroo is indeed to bring all of the different communities together and to come up with a response. And I think that this is a response that all of us acknowledge may well change as time goes by and the uses of generative AI change, but it's a response that all of us can make in a unified way.
To make a comment on that, I think indeed there's many different conversations going on around AI policy, and I think going back to the original questions like the challenges and opportunities, indeed there are challenges, I think they're clear, but clearly there are also opportunities, and I think Sarah talked about that quite confidently. But I think also these conversations are taking place with the publishing houses. They come up with policies, but also governments themselves come up with policies, research organizations come up with policies. It is all in flux. There is things changing, and indeed probably the next 12 months to 5 years, there will be new policies coming up, and they may change a little bit from time to time, and in certain areas, something may be allowed, which is not area is not allowed. But I think the most important thing here is about, and also particularly going back to our audience today, the early career researchers, what does it mean to me? And like, what should I take away from this? I think the most important thing here is about disclosure. If you have checked and say, well, I think this is something where I can use a generative AI tool, make sure that you disclose it and that it is clear and transparent that it has been used. I think whenever it's not disclosed and it's found out that it is that's been used, that already is a research integrity issue. As long as you disclose, at least it's clear it is there, and then a proper judgment can be made about that.
I think what also becomes clear here is, be it generative AI or other changes and challenges in scholarly communication, action happens and has to happen on various levels. We have the top level where publishing houses talk with representatives of, for example, researchers, research councils, etc. We have the national level where policy making happens. But I think what we should never forget is really the local level, where we have the universities and the work that happens at universities. And I've seen it in the chat and the Q&As. And this is capacity building. And that has to happen at the bottom. That has to happen at the universities, in place with researchers, both capacity building for artificial intelligence, capacity building for quality and an awareness for quality in scholarly communication. And I think what we see so often, for example, when we do training on predatory publishing, just like this morning, is that there always comes the question, where is my checklist? And I think this is a very important aspect of capacity building, and that is capacity building for complexity. How to deal with complexity, with ambiguity, with uncertainty. Things are changing, evolving so quickly. It will be a while until we have very clear answers and very clear best practices. So we need capacity to deal with uncertainty, etc.
And I can also say that at the journal level, It's our responsibility to provide a guide for author that is updated on these policies. And as an author, if you have a doubt, ask. It's always a good point. Like, those policies will evolve constantly, especially at the beginning of a new thing. So it's important from, for example, my perspective, to be updated on what are our policies of the use of AI. We receive many questions from authors that are not sure how to declare that in details, or if it should be declared or not. And I think it's an important responsibility of an editor to be happy to reply to these queries.
Thank you very much.
Looking at the time, I feel we have to kind of stop the discussion part of this and give room a bit for some questions from our participants, so we can answer these as well. I believe AI is a question that we could talk about for hours on end. We unfortunately do not have this time, but one of the last questions that came in also touched on this, but I'd like to broaden this question a bit. The question was, how do publishers control the editors, reviewers using generative AI for their peer review? And this I would like to broaden a bit to say, how much independence do editors have over their journals, and where is the publisher coming in, deciding things for them? So this is a question that always interested me as well. So how much room do you have as an editor, Marco, to decide these things on your own, or do you have to check back with your publisher, for example?
Specifically, what is my personal experience is that we tend to act as a team. So whatever important new policy or direction the journal has to take, we will discuss about it. There will be guideline to follow, of course, and then we have little room to personalize certain things around the journal. But for example, our journal is a journal that will publish pathology paper. We cannot decide for something that is very much far from that topic, or for example, or certain policies we want to be extremely strict and serious on ethical potential problems. So we decide to set up a specific workflow that will filter ethical checks before assessing the scientific content of a manuscript. There can be more blended kind of workflow at the manuscript. I would say, of course, the most important part is the final outcome out from it. But I do believe that, as we stated, for the bigger community, that goes also to the little community of the direct community of the journal. So the best approach is the collaborative approach.
Thank you very much. There is also a question regarding Sarah, what you mentioned about policy, if there's also a policy document available. As far as I understood, it's everything necessary is in the guide for authors, but is there something else?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Anya. So the first port of call is always the guide for authors of the journal. And what you will see there are journal-specific policies, but also links that will take you to, for example, publishing house policies. So one of the things that we do at Elsevier is always to make sure that we have our policies published. We also often have like FAQs following on from policies, so things like patient consent, which are incredibly detailed. We've put together FAQ documents that really help potential authors to navigate those policies and ensure that they can comply. So for our journals, elsevier.com is always the place to start. And I know that's also the case for my colleagues at other publishing houses as well. So whether you're publishing in a Wiley journal or a Springer Nature journal, always start with the guide for authors, and that will always direct you to the policies that you need.
Thank you very much. By the way, I'm starting the last poll. You can answer the last poll just by the time we are answering real questions.
I just briefly to chip in. If you Google, and if I can remember the correct name, I think a document that should be far more widespread, was it last year or the year before, COPE, the Coalition on Publishing Ethics, together with SPARC, together with DOAJ, together with WAME, published a document on standards in scholarly publishing. And there is a nice PDF going with it. So if anyone here is quick enough to find it and put it in the chat, I would be most grateful. This gives you as authors a clear idea what you can and should expect of a journal and the publisher. So I think this is something we always use in our training sessions as a foundational document so that you have orientation as to what you can also ask of a publisher, and where you probably should get a bit weary if some or more of these standards are missing.
I have just put it in the chat. It's the Principles of Transparency and Best Practice in Scholarly Publishing.
That's the title.
There you can find the full paper there.
So I think this provides a pretty good orientation for also for early career researchers as to what the basic standards are that should be fulfilled.
Okay. One other question. Maybe we have time for one more. This is perhaps a very good one, as it touches on the question of how we define scholarly communication. The question was, which of those four following sentences best suits the understanding of scholarly communication? Is it participating in the publication process, disseminating results to the research community, communicate to the broad public, and increase the impact of science on policy and society? So anyone wants to go ahead?
We have to choose between any of them? Isn't it just all?
Yeah.
Well, the communication to the broader public might be defined a little bit different than scholarly communications. I believe there's a different word for that. Science communication, or the communication about science to the public might be a bit different than scholarly communication. So the communication amongst researchers, more or less.
Communication of the research itself, or communication with the research community?
I would say scholarly communication is, to me, any and all activity that brings your research and your research findings out of your lab or your closest group of co-researchers to a wider audience, be it your scientific community, be it the public, etc. So this is really bringing it out of your office to a wider audience. This is, to me, scholarly communication. This also means that you contribute to the scholarly commons, to the shared scientific knowledge we have, and to not just keep it in your office under lock and seal, but really to put it out there.
As we are already in also maybe in a conclusion time, because we have reached our time. Wim, Marco, and Sarah, would you like to have a sentence as your conclusion to share for our today's discussion?
Yeah, maybe I can start. I think as a conclusion, we can say that this whole issue of quality is not a simple one. We can talk about it for a long time, as we have seen today. We had 90 minutes and still we are talking about it. It is a complex issue, but in the end, maybe what I said earlier, it is really about protecting your own research and make sure that it is being published at the right spot. And with that, do your due diligence and use your common sense, I think, is the best advice that I can give at this point in time. That's also what we try to do when we look at quality. And I think that's also something for you as early career researchers to use.
Yes, and I underline, the sense of communication and community that must be among all of us, because as we could see from today's discussion, we are different parts of the same machine, let's call it that way. And when we discuss about these important topics, we tend always to agree. So just a little bit of communication between the units will smoother every process and every challenges that are going to be ahead.
What I would like to add is perhaps a bit of a different perspective, a Western European perspective or European perspective. We see distrust in science on the rise. We see movements that weaken democracy, and science is a pillar of democracy, an important pillar of democracy. It's foundational for democracy. And safeguarding quality goes beyond just the scientific endeavor. It is contributing to safeguarding our democratic societies. It contributes to strengthening trust in science. And this is of utmost urgency and importance in many countries today.
Sarah?
You know, I really can't add anything to all of the eloquent answers that have been given. I support all of them. And I think that the last thought that I would leave everybody with is what we do is very special. As everybody has said, it is incredibly important for society and the advancement of society. And that's why we're here. That's why we take it seriously. And that's why we safeguard quality. So I hope everybody goes away from this event having learned something around safeguarding quality, because I think it certainly takes a village.
Thank you very much. And I have personally learned a lot, again, as every time in those discussions. And we try to answer the open questions afterwards. So watch the Researcher Academy platform for this. I also would like to thank my colleague Marita in the background, helping us with this session. And from my side, I would like to thank you for participating and hope to see you next time. Susanne?
Thank you also for joining in and for all your questions and comments. And one of the last ones was communication is certainly the first step. And this is what we took today, to come together and talk about quality, about safeguarding quality in scholarly communications. And I hope this will not be the last discussion we had on this topic, because it is ongoing. So thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you very much.